about on the undercard, we saw Xander Zayas, who is one of Top Rank's better young prospects, 154-pound contender. He improved to 20-0 with his win over Damian Sosa. This was one of those fights, Keith, where you put the young guy in with a guy that's never been stopped, see if he could do it. He didn't, but he dominated start to finish, 100-90, complete win. I found myself watching and feeling like it was kind of time for Xander Zayas to step up. Like, I want to see him, I think, in a bigger fight. I know he's just, 22 years old and certainly not yet in his prime, but I think he's such a big kid that he's eventually going to grow out of 154. I'd like to see him in a bigger fight at 154. And look, I'm coming to the table with a good option, I think, Keith. I would love to see Xander Zayas and Callum Walsh. I was talking with Tom Loeffler, the promoter of Callum Walsh, who said Callum plans to return in March at the Garden on St. Patrick's Day weekend against an opponent to be determined. I would love to see Callum Walsh in against Xander Zayas. Now, when I floated it to some of Zayas' people, it was like, no, that fight doesn't make enough money yet. We got to let it wait. There's got to be a belt on the line. All the stuff you hear when people don't want fights to happen. But, I've seen a lot of Xander over the last couple of years. I like him a lot. Really good kid, really talented fighter. I don't need to see him blow out some guy with a decent record with no meaning. Xander versus Callum, that's Irish versus Puerto Rico. Callum showing himself able to kind of start draw crowds in the U.S. and over in Ireland. I'd love to see that fight happen. Maybe it's one of those pie in the sky, kind of too soon, never going to happen, Chris kind of things, but I don't know, man. I don't need to see Callum knock out somebody else that he's too good for, and I don't need to see Xander outpoint, 100-90, 99-91, someone that he's too good for. So I'm ready, Keith, for a Xander Zayas step-up fight. What do you say?
Yeah, from a marketing standpoint, it's a good event, and it makes a lot of sense in that way. But I think you answered your own question. It's too soon for the fight to happen. I don't think either side would be rushing to make that happen, no matter what they say publicly or even behind closed doors. I don't think that will happen anytime soon. But it does make sense, as you said, and boxing's a business, as we well know, and from a business standpoint, it would make a lot of sense. But I saw some flaws in Callum Walsh in his fight against Villarreal when he fought at the theater a couple fights ago. So, but he's a hard puncher and talented kid, and obviously has a machine behind him from a promotional standpoint. So does Xander. I mean, they're trying to build him into the next Miguel Cotto. He ain't Miguel Cotto, as I think we well know at this point. He's a very nice kid. Works his butt off.
Power, I think, is his problem. Power is his biggest problem. Like, he punches hard, but it doesn't. Like, when he lands, it's like, wow, that's a clean shot. That looked like it's probably going to hurt him, but it's not hurting guys yet. Now, maybe he'll grow into some of that man strength, but right now, he's not. Power is not his friend in boxing.
There was one round, I believe it was the end of the 6th round, Chris, and I think you and I even talked about it while the fight was going on. But Xander unloaded probably a 6-punch combination toward the end of the 6th round where he lit up Damian Sosa, and he did take a step backward, but he caught him with a clean left hook and several other punches. And Sosa's never been knocked out. He's a very durable fighter, and that's the whole point of him being in the ring. He had 2 losses before they fought, but he had not been stopped. But when he wasn't able to take him out with those types of clean shots, I just said to myself, well, this fight's going 10 rounds. And you're right. I don't think he has the type of – I don't want to say he doesn't have power, because, he has 12 knockouts out of his 20 wins, and, of course, matchmaking has a lot to do with that. I get it. But he's not a big puncher. And the thing is, I understand from Top Rank's standpoint, they did this with Edgar Berlanga as well. You want to find the next Miguel Cotto, because there is a large contingent of passionate Puerto Rican fans in and around New York that will come to watch these types of guys fight consistently. But just because you keep saying that this person is the next Miguel Cotto does not make him Miguel Cotto. There was one Miguel Cotto, and it was amazing to watch. Fought everybody, moved up in weight, took fights that people thought he had no chance to win, that he won. Came back and avenged the Margarito fiasco. And I mean, Miguel Cotto is a legend, obviously, and did it without really being remotely interesting. Like, he's the The next interesting thing he says is going to be the first, probably. He's a very nice guy and very respectful and all, but he's not, the personality was not, it was all about the boxing, right? And the thing with Zayas is he's a great kid, man. He's very outgoing. He's very likable. He works his butt off and he does have talent, but he's being matched somewhat conservatively because one, he is still young, and two, because they don't think he's ready for the types of fights that we would like to see him in. He's ready to fight Callum Walsh if that made sense from the standpoint of the two sides and they came to an agreement. Of course, he's ready for someone like that. But if you put Tim Tszyu in the ring with Xander Zayas, would you favor Xander Zayas?
No, and look, I am nowhere near ready for calling for Xander Zayas against Tim Tszyu. I don't think that Callum Walsh is a fight that, Peter Kahn, the manager of Xander Zayas, and others around him should be avoiding. Like the fight they're talking about making either next or soon is Vito Mielnicki. And Vito fought on that undercard as well. He's another guy that can sell tickets in the New York area. I thought he looked okay in his fight. I didn't think he stood out in any way. I'd make Xander a big favorite in that fight. So, if they make that, fine, whatever. But to me, a Callum Walsh fight is like the boxer against the puncher. Whereas I think Xander, for his age, is a really good boxer. And I think Callum, for his age, is a really good puncher. And I think the atmosphere for a crowd like that would be really good. Now, maybe there's not a title on the line, and maybe there's not millions of dollars on the line, but does there have to be for every, like you brought up Edgar Berlanga, like, do we really have to do that here, where you have a fighter that you get to a glossy record who fights nobody and earns a shot at Canelo Alvarez, where in the aftermath, all the positives were about how he stayed on his feet, right? Like, I don't want that to be the goal of all matchmaking. If I am the trainers and the promoter and the manager of Xander Zayas, I am going into that Top Rank office. I'm talking to Bob Arum. I'm talking to Carl Moretti. And I'm saying, let's make that Callum Walsh happen in March of 2025. Great fight in the theater. Electric atmosphere. I'd be a favorite going into that fight. That would make a lot of sense for me. Look, for whatever it's worth, Tom Loeffler says he'd make that fight. He says he'd make that fight. Maybe Freddie Roach, the trainer of Callum Walsh, doesn't feel the exact same way right now. But if they're willing to do it, I would make that fight right away, because that is a fun main event for a theater at the Garden fight. I know the way you're looking at me, Keith, you think I'm an idiot, and you think I don't know. This is just matchmaking. This is just matchmaking for dummies right here. It's like, let's put these two guys together. But look, there's a reason that UFC has success, is that they put guys like this in. If these two guys were UFC fighters, they'd have been fighting by now. They might have fought twice by now if they had been UFC fighters. I understand the money's different and how you build a fighter is different, but I don't know. For whatever, the bottom line is, if I'm Zayas' team, I am not shying away from a Callum Walsh fight. I am pushing hard for a Callum Walsh fight, because that's a fight I would be a big favorite to win.
But again, I think in saying what you said, you answered some of your own questions. There's not enough money involved in the fight now. There wouldn't be a title at stake. And those,
but there probably never will be. I think Xander's going to go up.
The money, of course, is a factor as well.
How
and
much
it's
do they deserve to make?
Fight.
Like how it's a risky. How you are going.
Whoever's willing to pay. Look, it only takes one person who's willing to pay you whatever to define what you're worth, I suppose, right? So, Top Rank goes about their business in a much more strategic, fiscally responsible way, we'll say, than most companies do. So they're not going to, throw crazy money at a fight that's not worth a lot of money. But I just don't think it makes sense. Now, look, Vito Mielnicki Jr. coming back into the fold, because that's more realistic, because they have control of both fighters.
Correct.
And when Vito Mielnicki Jr. was supposed to sign with, he was going to sign with Top Rank initially and then eventually went to PBC. And part of the reason he came back into the Top Rank fold was, one, he wasn't going to be able to fight frequently enough for PBC. He didn't necessarily see the path toward the types of fights that he wanted with PBC, maybe. But anyway, he came back to Top Rank. He can sell tickets. I saw some regression in him the other night, unfortunately. I don't know if he was hurt or whatever, but that was a fight he was expected to win by stoppage, and he didn't. But I've seen before that, from the time he lost, he was upset 3.5 years ago or so on Fox during the heart of the pandemic. I've seen some improvement in him that would lead me to believe that a fight against Xander Zayas would certainly be more competitive than most people would have thought that it would have been 2 or 3 years ago. The matchmakers at Top Rank see it as a more competitive fight than most people would have seen it once upon a time. As you said, Vito didn't look. I think he'd be the first person to tell you, and his dad would tell you as well. He didn't look as good the other night as they were expecting. That is a fight that I think, though, is realistic. Not next necessarily, but next year sometime or something like that, because that also would do pretty good business. Because Milnicki's a ticket. I've seen it firsthand, Chris. I mean, where I live in northern New Jersey. Vito Milnicki lives a couple of towns away from me. I've seen him fight at Prudential Center numerous times. He sells tickets. I mean, there are no two ways about it. You saw the White Magic T-shirts and all that. Vito Milnicki,
a lot of his fans left too before the main event. There was a swath of tickets, some for him, some for Xander that took off before the main event started.
And Xander's, has a fan base as well. So I know we've gone off on a tangent here about who Xander Zayas is going to fight at some point, and I don't know that we're necessarily planning for that.
Look, I'm just saying. Look, I'll put a button on it with this. When Miguel Cotto was 20-0, he fought for his first world title against Kelson Pinto, who was 21-0 at that time. Went on to fight Randall Bailey, fought Chop Chop Corley. Going up the list, fought Paulie Malignaggi. These were all the subsequent fights. Like, I understand maybe age, a little bit different, but if Xander Zayas wants to be the next Miguel Cotto, you got to put him in good fights, exciting fights that can help make him the next Miguel Cotto. I don't think a fight with Vito Milnicki, even though it will sell tickets, I don't think that's a good style matchup. I don't think it's fun to watch. I think him and Callum could be. Maybe Xander winds up winning 9-1, but Callum's got that equalizer, and that's the kind of fight that I would want to see Xander Zayas in. All right.
Can I just emphasize one thing? Just because he's Puerto Rican does not, you might not be able to make him the next Miguel Cotto because he just might not be good enough.
True. There's only one Miguel Cotto.
That's my point. This is a legendary fighter and it's a high bar. It's really not fair to Xander Zayas to keep saying that he's going to be the next, because Cotto hated he was supposed to be the next Trinidad, and he hated that. He wanted to be his own person, and he obviously carved out quite a career for himself. But maybe just let Xander Zayas be Xander Zayas. He's fun to watch. He could be in some competitive fights. Not the one punch knockout power, as you said before, that people might prefer. But he could be in some good scraps, and they'll sell tickets. So let's see how he moves forward here.
Great. We both agree. Callum Walsh, March 2025. Cool. Good stuff.